At dinner she said, "If we ever have kids, I hope they look like my ex. He had better genes." I just stared at her. When I put my fork down and told her my plan, I should have noticed the signs earlier, but the moment everything snapped into focus happened during a quiet dinner that was supposed to celebrate a promotion I had worked toward for years. The restaurant was the kind of place where the music stayed low enough to let couples talk without leaning in, and where the servers treated every movement like a ceremony. I had chosen it deliberately because I wanted space to think about the future with Lily, the woman I believed I would marry by the end of the year. She wore a burgundy dress that always made her seem more confident than she admitted she was. The candles between us flickered against her bracelet, and the night felt almost too peaceful for what she eventually said. It came out casually, as if she had been holding the sentence in her pocket for a possible conversation starter. While swirling her wine, she mentioned that if we ever had children, she hoped they inherited the features of her ex because he had stronger genes. She said it the same way someone would mention a preference for a paint color. There was no hesitation or awareness of the weight that kind of comment carries. I didn't react immediately because my mind shut down for a few seconds. I kept my fork in my hand as if the comment belonged to a different table. When it finally registered, I placed the fork down slowly and watched her expression to understand whether she was joking, testing me, or breaking something that had never been stable. She didn't appear embarrassed or regretful. She didn't even look up from her plate. She continued eating as if the night had not shifted. A long silence stretched between us, and I realized she was comfortable with that kind of silence because she expected me to ignore the comment entirely. She had always relied on my ability to smooth tension so she wouldn't have to confront anything uncomfortable. That night, something in me refused to play along. I asked her why she would say something like that, and she shrugged. She said her ex came from an impressive family, that he had a commanding presence, and that their breakup had been complicated. She spoke about him as if he still held a place in her life that she never planned to completely clear out. I noticed she avoided looking at me whenever she mentioned him, which raised a question I had not wanted to consider until now. Was this entire relationship built on comparisons I never knew she was making? The more she talked, the clearer it became that she wasn't describing a memory. She was describing an ongoing fantasy she had been nursing quietly for years. She acted like she believed it was harmless because she never acted on it physically, but the emotional weight of what she said was far heavier than she understood. My mind raced with possibilities. If her ex still occupied that much space in her thoughts, then something had never ended cleanly between them. The idea unsettled me more than I expected. She had told me before that their relationship ended because they wanted different things, but she never clarified what those things were or who initiated the breakup. I had accepted her vague explanation because I trusted her. That trust started to feel thinner with every passing minute. I leaned back in my chair and watched her, and a plan began forming in my head. I didn't raise my voice or accuse her of anything. I wanted to see how far she would go if she believed I wasn't upset. When I finally spoke, I told her that if she still thought about him that intensely, maybe it would be best if I met him. She froze mid-movement because the suggestion struck a nerve she had tried to bury. I maintained a calm tone and explained that if we were serious about a future together, then clarity mattered. She nodded at first, but her eyes tightened, which told me the idea introduced a level of risk she wasn't prepared for. She asked why meeting him mattered. I said it was important to understand the standards she kept referencing, especially if she compared him to me. She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, she spoke with strangely rehearsed confidence. She insisted she and her ex were completely done, and that she mentioned him only because she was joking. I didn't believe her. The sentence she told me earlier wasn't a joke. Jokes have a rhythm. That line came out too naturally to be anything but a belief she carried with pride. I asked her directly whether they still talked. She denied it too quickly, almost with reflexive energy. She avoided my eyes and busied her hands with folding her napkin. I watched her breathe faster. The short physical cues gave her away. She wasn't only uncomfortable because she feared confrontation. She was uncomfortable because she was hiding something. A server came by to refill water, breaking the tension for a moment. When he left, I told her the second part of my plan. If she had no connection with her ex, then arranging a simple conversation with him wouldn't be hard. I said I could reach out to him myself if she preferred I take that step. Her hand tightened around the stem of her glass. That tiny reaction confirmed more than any answer she could have spoken aloud. She whispered that talking to him might reopen old wounds. That explanation felt too convenient. Wounds don't reopen unless something never healed. I didn't push back on her statement. Instead, I asked a straightforward question. Should I worry that her heart was never fully in this relationship? She insisted she loved me, but the timing felt manufactured. Her voice rose just enough to feel performative. She talked about our shared plans, the apartment we hoped to move into, and the wedding conversations we had been having since spring. She listed details that made the relationship look solid rather than truths that made it feel solid. It was the difference between defending stability and actually having it. I let her keep talking until she ran out of sentences. When she finally fell silent, I revisited her earlier comment about children. She looked away when I mentioned it. It wasn't embarrassment. It was regret that she had said it out loud. People only look away like that when they wish they could take something back purely for strategic reasons, not moral ones. I told her calmly that the comment revealed something about how she still viewed her ex. She tried to brush it off, but the damage was already done. I felt a shift inside me, the kind of shift that happens when a person realizes they might have been walking in the wrong direction for much longer than they understood. The first twist arrived when I finally stepped outside to get a breath of air while she settled the bill. I needed a moment to think about the implications of everything she said. While I stood near the entrance, her phone lit up inside her purse, which she had left by my chair. A message appeared from an unsaved number, written in a casual tone that implied long-standing familiarity. The message said the evening event went well and thanked her for the update. It ended with a suggestion that they talk later. The tone wasn't friendly. It wasn't professional. It was intimate in a way that bypassed small talk. I didn't open the phone or scroll. I saw enough from the lock screen to know the truth. She still had an ongoing connection with her ex, and she had been updating him about her life. Possibly even about me. When she returned to the table, she didn't notice my expression had changed. She talked about dessert options as if the night still had room for normalcy. I listened quietly, knowing nothing about the situation was as simple as she wanted it to appear. And now a question formed in my mind that would define everything that came next. If Lily had been treating the entire relationship as a silent competition with her past, then what exactly was I to her? Lily didn't realize that her phone notification had altered everything. I didn't mention it at the restaurant because I wanted to examine what she would say once we left the carefully staged environment she used to manage conversations. As we walked to the car, she tried to lighten the mood by discussing weekend plans. She spoke about seeing her friends, going to a concert, and maybe visiting her sister. None of it involved me in any way beyond being the chauffeur to deliver her from one event to the next. On the drive home, she finally acknowledged that the dinner felt tense and suggested we brush the whole thing aside. She said misunderstandings happen, and she didn't want one strange comment to ruin a good night. That line convinced me she thought the problem lay in the awkwardness, not in the truth behind what she said. I remained quiet because I needed to understand how deeply the connection with her ex still influenced her thinking. When we got to the apartment, she went to the bathroom while I sat on the couch replaying the notification I saw. The message had been too casual for a man who supposedly held no place in her life. I needed clarity, but I didn't want to approach it with accusations she could easily deny. Instead, I decided to test the situation carefully. When she returned, I mentioned the plan again. I told her it would be helpful for us to meet her ex if that would finally close the chapter she seemed unsure about. Her reaction exposed more than she intended. She became defensive immediately, not because the idea was strange, but because she had no way to explain why contact with him remained open. She insisted they hadn't spoken in ages, yet her voice wavered just enough to betray the lie. I asked if she wanted to move forward with the engagement with no questions left unanswered. She nodded, but the nod looked forced. The next day, she acted overly affectionate, which seemed like an attempt to mask the tension. She brought me lunch at work, which she never did, and sent long messages describing how much she appreciated what we had. The sudden burst of effort felt orchestrated. People who fear losing something tend to cling tightly rather than truthfully. That afternoon, I reached out to her sister, Elena. She and I had always been friendly, and she usually spoke plainly without dramatics. I didn't tell her everything. I only asked whether Lily ever mentioned unresolved feelings about her ex. Elena hesitated before answering. She said Lily struggled with closure because she never accepted that the breakup wasn't a temporary pause. According to her, Lily once believed her ex would eventually realize what he lost and come back. She used to talk about building a life impressive enough to make him regret leaving. Hearing that confirmed a suspicion I hoped was wrong. I thanked Elena and didn't reveal more than necessary. Later that evening, Lily called me while I was still in the office. Her voice sounded cheerful, almost overly bright. She said she changed her mind and wanted me to meet her ex if that made me feel comfortable. She framed it as a sign of transparency, but her tone carried strain beneath the enthusiasm. I agreed, and she said she would text him to arrange something. She tried to act indifferent, but her breathing pattern gave away her anxiety. 2 hours later, I received a message from her saying her ex, whose name was Darren, agreed to meet. She asked if I wanted to schedule the conversation for the weekend. I told her that would work. The speed at which she arranged the meeting surprised me because it contradicted the idea that they had not spoken in a long time. People do not respond with such instant familiarity unless there is an existing line of communication. The next morning, before the meeting took place, twist number 2 revealed itself. I went to our home office to print a document. While searching through the drawers for paper, I found a small notebook with a metallic blue cover she used for planning social commitments. I opened it to look for a blank page and saw a list written in her handwriting. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't coded. It was simply titled Things to Show Him. Underneath, she had listed items like vacation photos, gifts I bought her, dinner reservations, and details about the ring she wanted upgraded. At first, I didn't understand who him referred to. Then a second page answered it. It contained notes about how she believed her ex reacted when he saw something she posted online. She wrote that he must have regretted losing her when she shared photos of a trip we took, or when she uploaded a picture of the flowers I bought for her birthday. She wasn't documenting memories. She was tracking perceived reactions. I kept reading and found an entry that chilled me more than anything she had said during the dinner. She wrote that the engagement might finally push things forward, because it would prove she had reached a level of life stability that would make him reconsider everything. She didn't describe me as a partner. She described me as leverage. I closed the notebook and sat in silence while waves of understanding settled. She wasn't trying to build a future with me. She was trying to win a competition she believed existed between her and a man who left her long ago. I realized I had been pulled into a game I never agreed to play. When the weekend came, we arrived at a small cafe where the meeting would take place. I noticed she styled herself more carefully than usual. She seemed nervous, adjusting her sleeves and checking her reflection repeatedly. The cafe wasn't busy, which made the moment feel uncomfortably intimate. When Darren walked in, Lily straightened with anticipation that had nothing to do with me. He noticed her, but offered only a polite greeting. There was no spark, no hidden longing in his expression, only mild awkwardness. When he sat down, I introduced myself. He nodded without discomfort, which told me he had already known who I was. We exchanged casual conversation at first. I observed how Lily reacted to every sentence he said. She waited for cues, for openings, for some sign of regret or interest. He didn't give her any. He mentioned he was focusing on work and adjusting to a new apartment. There was no emotional tension. She had written an entire narrative about a connection that didn't exist anymore. When the conversation shifted toward the past, Lily tried to hint that their breakup was never fully resolved. She spoke as if both of them had left things unfinished. He responded firmly. He said the relationship ended completely because they were moving in opposite directions and that he never expected anything beyond closure. He didn't return the energy she projected. It became clear she had imagined the complexity. She tried to recover by saying she was happy now and engaged. She nudged my arm as if to underline it. I could tell she wanted a visible reaction from him. She didn't get one. Then something unexpected happened. Elena, her sister, walked into the cafe. Lily's eyes widened. I had invited her without telling Lily because I wanted someone who understood the dynamics to witness the truth. She joined us quietly. Darren nodded politely. Lily panicked in small ways she tried to hide by adjusting her posture. The moment that shifted everything came when Lily slipped and revealed she hoped her ex would recognize what he lost when he saw how stable her life became. She said it without realizing the implication. Silence followed, thick and revealing. Elena stared at her in disbelief. Darren leaned back as if distancing himself from the idea. That was the moment when Lily's composure cracked. She realized her intentions were visible now. She stood abruptly and walked out of the cafe without saying anything. The three of us exchanged a look that required no explanation. And as I watched her rush down the sidewalk, I realized something unsettling. She didn't leave because she felt guilty. She left because her strategy collapsed. Lily left the cafe so abruptly that even the people at nearby tables glanced up to see what had happened. I watched her disappear around the corner, moving with a frantic pace that wasn't driven by embarrassment, but by the realization that everything she had constructed in her mind no longer held together. The illusion collapsed in front of the two people she never expected to confront her. Elena didn't say much as she sat there, processing the moment. Darren looked shaken, not because he still cared about her, but because he finally understood the narrative she had been projecting onto him. After a few minutes, we walked outside. I expected Lily to be waiting nearby, but she was nowhere in sight. I didn't chase her. There was nothing left to clarify. Instead, I walked back to the car and let the silence settle around me. Elena eventually called to say she found Lily pacing in the alley behind the cafe. She hadn't spoken a word. She just kept muttering about how I ruined something she had been building for years. That phrase stayed with me. It implied she saw her life as a construction site where every milestone had a strategic purpose rather than an emotional one. When I returned to the apartment, Lily wasn't home yet. The living room was neat, the lights were still off, and nothing looked disturbed. For a brief moment, I wondered if she planned to stay at her sister's place to avoid facing what happened. But an hour later, the front door opened abruptly. She walked in with an expression that didn't show sadness or remorse. Instead, she looked angry that her script had been interrupted. She didn't speak at first. She walked to the dining table, removed the vase I bought when we moved in, and placed it on the floor. She then swept her arm across the table and knocked everything onto the ground, letting plates and silverware crash against the hardwood. The sound echoed through the apartment. She wasn't destroying property for emotional release. She was trying to reset her environment because it no longer reflected the version of herself she wanted to present. I didn't stop her. I stood near the doorway and watched as she tore through drawers, grabbed receipts, threw decorative items against the wall, and ripped the binder where we kept our wedding plans. She moved quickly, almost methodically. She paused only when she reached the binder's last page, the page where she once wrote possible wedding dates in pencil. She stared at it long enough for her breathing to shift, then ripped it in half and dropped the pieces at her feet. When she finally turned toward me, her voice came out unsteady. She said the entire situation at the cafe wasn't fair. She claimed I ambushed her. She blamed me for exposing things that didn't need to be exposed. She insisted I misunderstood everything and that she only wanted closure, not reconciliation. Her explanation didn't align with what I saw in the notebook or the way she behaved when Darren arrived. She didn't want closure. She wanted validation, and she believed the engagement was the tool that would force it out of him. I told her calmly that her actions spoke for themselves. I asked why she had been tracking his reactions, why she kept contact open, and why she said that line about children having his genes. She didn't answer directly. She pivoted instead, accusing me of snooping, even though the notebook was sitting openly in a drawer. She said everyone reflects on past relationships. She said nothing she wrote was serious and that I was reading too much into it. Her responses came out too rehearsed to be spontaneous. Then twist number 3 struck. As she continued defending herself, she let something slip. She said she would have invited Darren to the wedding anyway because she believed his presence would finally end things. She claimed seeing her walk down the aisle might give him the closure he never gave her. Her phrasing was off. She didn't speak like someone who wanted closure. She spoke like someone who wanted an audience for her transformation. Then she made a second slip, one she didn't notice until I repeated it back to her. She mentioned she had considered telling him personally that the wedding was happening, but she didn't know how he would react. She said she worried he might misunderstand the invitation. That sentence revealed more than anything else she said that night. She had already imagined him at the wedding. She had already considered how he would see her in that setting. She had planned a moment where she could stand in front of him, wearing the life she believed would impress him. The engagement wasn't about love. It was about spectacle. I asked her directly whether she intended to use the wedding as a stage. Her silence provided the answer. She looked away and clenched her jaw. The truth had been dragged into the open, and she had no way to reshape it without contradicting herself further. When I told her I wanted to cancel the wedding, she reacted as if I had threatened her stability. She begged me to reconsider, not with emotional vulnerability, but with panic. She said canceling the wedding would make her look unstable to her friends. She said it would embarrass her at work because she had already talked about the engagement in detail. She mentioned financial commitments she had already told people we made, even though I never agreed to half of them. She painted a picture of social consequences, not personal heartbreak. She then grabbed my arm and said something I didn't expect. She said I couldn't cancel the wedding because it would undo everything she had tried to build. That line clarified the situation with perfect accuracy. The relationship wasn't a bond to her. It was a project. She had invested time, reputation, and emotional energy into a narrative where she rose above a past that rejected her. If the wedding disappeared, so did the narrative. She tried a different approach next. She softened her voice, sat on the couch, and lowered her gaze. She said she only wanted to believe she made the right choices. She said everyone wonders what past partners think of their lives. She insisted the comment about children and genes was something she said carelessly without meaning it. The problem with her explanation was that she never once apologized. She only justified. The apartment looked like a storm had passed through it. Shards of ceramic glimmered near the walls. Pages from the wedding binder were scattered across the floor. The vase she placed gently on the ground earlier sat intact, untouched, showing she could control her actions when she wanted to. The destruction wasn't emotional. It was strategic. I told her the plan was no longer simple. I told her I intended to walk away not because I wanted revenge, but because her intentions were incompatible with the future she pretended we were building. She stood slowly, shaking her head as if trying to undo the reality around her. She approached me again and said I couldn't leave because she had spent too long trying to prove something. Her voice cracked slightly, revealing a mix of fear and disbelief. For the first time, she understood she had no leverage left. Then Elena arrived. She must have sensed something was wrong because she came straight inside when she saw the destroyed apartment. She took one look at the scattered papers, the broken plates, and Lily's state, and realized the argument had gone beyond simple tension. When she asked what happened, Lily tried to spin the story instantly. She said I blindsided her with a meeting and humiliated her. She said Darren gave the wrong impression and that everything had been twisted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply repeated her own words from earlier. I explained the notebook, the tracking, the invitation she planned, and the comment she made at dinner. Elena stood still, processing each detail with growing clarity. Her sister's expression shifted from rage to panic as she realized Elena wasn't accepting her version of the story. And when Lily finally understood she had lost control of the narrative, she sank onto the floor among the torn pages, gripping them as if that could hold the pieces of her life together. Everything pointed toward one clear direction now. The wedding couldn't happen, and the truth was about to reach more people than she ever wanted. The apartment stayed scattered with torn pages, broken plates, and overturned chairs while Lily sat among the debris like someone trying to gather pieces of a story she could no longer control. Elena kept her distance, watching her sister with a mix of concern and disappointment. The silence felt heavy because everyone in the room knew something irreversible had taken place. Lily wasn't trying to rebuild trust. She was trying to preserve an image that had already collapsed. I told her gently but firmly that the wedding was canceled. The words barely left my mouth before she reacted. She stood abruptly and insisted that I couldn't make that decision alone. She said it would ruin her reputation. She said her colleagues already bought gifts. She said her parents had been telling relatives about future plans. She didn't mention a single reason tied to us as a couple. Every reason centered around what people would see when they looked at her life from the outside. I repeated myself. The wedding was off. The engagement had ended long before I said the words. It ended the moment she built a fantasy where her ex was the silent observer of her accomplishments. It ended the moment she admitted she wanted him at the ceremony. She tried to argue, but Elena stepped in. She told Lily that the situation was too serious to gloss over. She asked her directly why she needed her ex's approval so badly that she risked destroying another relationship to get it. Lily stared at her and didn't respond. Instead, she sank back onto the floor, clutching the torn binder pages as if they contained the version of her future she still wanted to believe in. Elena moved closer and knelt beside her. She spoke calmly, reminding her that she had made choices based on insecurity rather than honesty. Lily tried to defend herself by saying she only wanted to feel valued. That phrase held weight, but it didn't excuse the damage she caused. I stepped away to call her parents because the situation needed transparency. I didn't dramatize anything. I explained the comments she made, the meeting with Darren, the notebook, the fact that she admitted she intended to invite him to the wedding, and the destruction in the apartment. Her mother's voice wavered when she asked if I was certain. Her father didn't say much, but asked if Lily was safe. I told him she wasn't in danger, only overwhelmed by the consequences. They said they would come over immediately. When they arrived, the shock on their faces was unmistakable. They had always viewed Lily as someone who handled life with poise. Seeing their daughter surrounded by broken plates and torn paper shattered that image instantly. Her mother rushed to her, but Lily pulled away and insisted she didn't need help. She kept saying she had everything under control, even though the room proved the opposite. Her father asked me to explain what happened. I described everything without exaggeration. I mentioned the dinner comment. I mentioned the message from her ex. I mentioned the cafe conversation. I mentioned the notebook. I mentioned the plan she had created without telling anyone. Lily tried to interrupt and insist that everyone misunderstood her. She said she never intended to hurt me. She never intended to jeopardize anything. She said she only wanted a sense of closure. Her father asked why she kept contact with someone she claimed was irrelevant. She didn't answer. Her mother asked why she turned the engagement into a symbolic performance. She didn't answer that either. Instead, she pressed her hands over her face and repeated that she wasn't trying to lose anything. She said she worked too hard to let everything fall apart. Her mother finally said something that shifted the room's energy. She told Lily that actions have weight, and that building a life based on competition will never bring peace. She said the engagement was supposed to be a partnership, not a stage to prove something to someone who didn't care anymore. Lily finally spoke with a voice that sounded far smaller than usual. She admitted she believed Darren would see her life improving and question his decision. She admitted she thought the engagement would force a reaction. She admitted she wanted him to witness her wedding, not to rekindle anything, but to confirm she had won. Her father closed his eyes when she said that. Her mother lowered her head. The climax came when Lily realized the full extent of what she lost. She asked whether I would reconsider if she apologized or removed all reminders of her ex. She said she could delete their messages, throw out old items, and start fresh. She said she could prove her commitment if I gave her another chance. But nothing she offered addressed the underlying issue. Her heart had been anchored to the wrong place for too long. An apology couldn't rebuild something that was never founded on honesty. I told her gently that the relationship had reached its conclusion. The moment she used our engagement as leverage, it stopped being a relationship in the real sense. It became a strategy, and no strategy can replace genuine trust. She collapsed into her mother's arms, not because she loved me deeply, but because the blueprint she designed for her life fell apart. I packed a few essentials and told her parents I would stay with a friend for a while. I wasn't running away. I was stepping out of a space that no longer represented partnership. As I walked out, Lily didn't call after me. She didn't chase or demand further explanation. She simply stared at the doorway, realizing the version of her life she envisioned was slipping out of reach. The consequences unfolded quickly. Within a week, her parents discovered she had made several non-refundable deposits for wedding venues and fittings without informing me. She had assumed I would cover them later, and when I didn't, the cost fell entirely onto her. They refused to bail her out because she had misled them as well. She lost the apartment she planned to move into because my signature was required on the lease extension. I removed myself from it. She had to move back in with her parents until she settled her finances. Darren sent her one final message, telling her not to contact him again. He didn't insult her or revisit the past. He simply drew a boundary she had avoided acknowledging. That hurt her more than she admitted. She eventually unfollowed him on every platform, not to move on, but because she couldn't handle seeing a life she had projected meaning on to continue without her. I focused on rebuilding my own routines. I returned to work, reconnected with friends, and allowed myself the space to understand why I ignored early signs. I didn't hate her. I didn't seek revenge or validation. I simply closed a chapter that was never meant to continue. Several months later, a coworker who knew Lily from college mentioned she had been quieter socially. She rarely spoke about the engagement and avoided conversations about relationships. She confessed to friends that she lost everything because she wanted someone from her past to acknowledge her worth. Hearing that made me realize she finally understood the cost of turning life into a competition. And as for me, I walked away from that experience with a clarity I never expected. The future became simpler once I stopped trying to fix something that wasn't built on truth.